Hello and welcome to the Cameo Show. I'm your host, Cameo. Today on the Cameo Show, we're chatting with Daniel Patterson. On social media, he's at Patterson Perspective, and we're talking about his 10 years of sobriety. From breaking destructive patterns to finding freedom and authenticity, his story is packed with inspiration and practical wisdom for anyone ready to make a change. Daniel is an author, a speaker, a former educator who uses his platform to share the raw and real truths of recovery and the importance of mental health. Through sharing his journey, he's inspiring others to embrace authenticity, overcome addiction, and live with purpose. His impactful work has been featured in major media outlets like the LA Times, NBC, ABC, Fox News, and the Huffington Post, to name a few. And today he's sharing his powerful journey and lessons he's learned along the way with us. So Daniel, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. That was a tall introduction. I appreciate that.
That's
Wow.
all you, buddy. I mean, you made it easy on me.
Good Lord.
We're honored to have you. We connected through Instagram just recently. I've been following you for a while, along with tens of thousands of other people who feel very connected to your content because you're real and you share kind of what you were thinking and what you've been going through and what you've experienced and how it's helped you in an effort to help others. And I just think it's so beautiful because not everyone feels brave enough to do that around this topic specifically. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for connecting with us. And I just want to dive right in. So
Sure.
before we do so, I better introduce my husband and co-host, Mr. Greg Braun. Sorry, Greg.
Little old me. No, no. I always like to start off with a dad joke, and I've got a good one for today. And Daniel, do you know what state is the most well-known state for its tiny drinks?
No.
Minnesota.
Ah.
All right. Now that we've kicked things off with a few laughs, thank you, Greg. That's actually a really good one.
That is a good one.
Sometimes the dad jokes leave me like, okay, like a dad joke should. But let's dive right in. Let's start with your journey 10 years ago. Tell us how it started. Was it something that you made the decision, like a conscious decision, like tomorrow I'm going to stop drinking?
No, it was not that sexy or pre-planned. It was an accident. So I had been in my head, drinking was a chore. It was in the chore phase of using, where I was super anxious about it before I did it. I was always doing drunk math, like how many drinks can I have if I'm with these people? How many drinks can I have before? How many drinks can I have at dinner so that it doesn't look like I have a problem? Just like the shell game of vodka and Chardonnay, just like
Yeah.
mixing it, trying to spin it. So the times when, like, I think my wife thought I was definitely going to quit, or I promised I was going to quit, I never did. And then New Year's Eve, I guess 2014, we went out to dinner. My wife, we had a 3-year-old daughter at the time, had some wine at dinner, and then went home and then just like drank a ton of Woodbridge Chardonnay. Very classy here. And like the big bottles, they're very user friendly. So we woke up the next day, and my wife was very good at being like passive aggressive in a good way. So we had an early breakfast, like 8 a.m. the next day, right?
New Year's Day.
We weren't doing anything on New Year's Day 2015. So we go to this Norm's Diner. It's this really like kind of old school, very like steamy, clinky, clanky, kind of small thing. And I'm there and I feel like Buddy the Elf. Everything is like really closing in on me. And I start having auditory hallucinations, which is wild. So I got out to my car. We're with another family, so I'm like completely embarrassed, right? My wife's mortified. And I'm having these hallucinations, and that shook me to my core, right? Because normally I like my anxiety, I'll talk to myself, like it's that voice, right? But this was a different voice. And I was like, okay. So I went to the doctor, and anyways, they were like, you got to pump the brakes, right? Because we have to figure out like what's happening here. So that's how I started a dry January. But it was not like the other times where I had said, okay, starting Monday, I'm gonna quit, right? Like I would always do this thing, like set this future ambiguous date and then make excuses why it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Labor Day, I can't do that, like I would always
Right.
like have what holidays coming up that I can like attach my drinking to. So
Right.
I started a dry January, but not like it is today, right? It just happened to be January, and I haven't had a drink or drug since.
January 2015, so just over
Correct.
10 years. I shared with you before we started recording that Greg is also in his 10th year, and I'm approaching mine of alcohol-free living. And I'm not surprised to hear you say, I didn't necessarily plan it, because
Right.
neither of us did either. It just kind of happened. Drinking up to that point was just something that we had always done.
Right.
Attached it to whatever holiday or whatever celebration or whatever non-celebration, like our football
Emotion.
team lost.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm
Like
I'm
I'm
upset, or
bored.
I had a rough day at work. I need to drink. So Greg decided to stop drinking, and I kind of lagged behind because I had other reasons, like attachment with my job and different things that I was doing that
Yeah.
felt too foreign for me to stop drinking. But I feel like that's a common thing that you hear often, is that people weren't necessarily planning to. Like, I don't even
Right.
know my actual date. So I can't, I say I'm approaching 10 years because I don't know what the day was. I remember that what happened, but I don't remember
Right.
the
And
day,
I think
which,
part of the reason I remember the day so specifically is because of the day it was.
yeah, for
Mhm.
sure.
And I just remember watching uh that month and into February watching college football playoffs and the NFL playoffs and just being like questioning all of my life decisions. Like what? Like
Yeah.
I remember like Googling uh the Super Bowl halftime. I'm like, is Katy Perry sober? Because she performed at the halftime show of
Mhm.
that. Is Tom Brady sober? Just like trying to figure out like this new landscape of the world. And
Yeah.
it was horrifying.
Yeah.
Well, and 10 years ago, it wasn't as widely talked about.
No,
Social media was kind of still a platform that we just posted pictures on and shared like what our family's doing.
totally.
So there wasn't a lot of emphasis, to your point, on like dry January or,
No,
gosh, I
wasn't a thing
remember.
really.
Yeah, right. I remember it wasn't even like an option to drink non-alcoholic drinks because it was O'Doul's. That was your choice, like there weren't fun bubbly waters, there weren't curious elixirs, there weren't these different beverages that you could drink. Not that that's necessarily a way that people transition, but it was just a completely different time. And so your situation was unique in that you started experiencing some health situations.
Yeah. But I
And
mean, all of the other health situations that I had experienced while drinking never got my attention. But I think because this one was, I mean, I knew I had horrible anxiety when I was hungover. I knew the repercussions. I just didn't care. Like, like when you're hungover, you're so hungover and you're just making all sorts of promises to God and everyone. And then at like
yes.
4 p.m., you've turned a corner and you're
Yeah.
like, I'm back, baby. Like it's problem solved. I can drink again. Like we're good. We're good.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. All too familiar for sure. I used to call that my Sunday sorries, where I
Oh
would
yeah.
get
Mhm.
my phone out and text everyone that I probably offended the night
Hmm.
before,
Yeah, the
or
apology
any
tour.
any day of the week for that matter. The apology tour. Yes. So when you first stopped drinking, you said like familiar for us as well, like Super Bowl, you start Googling and questioning things, getting a little bit more curious about what does
Mhm.
this actually look like. Were you scared?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was because I had never had any experiences as an adult without alcohol,
Mhm.
like zero. I mean, so there was no, everything that first year was new.
Mhm.
Yes.
Everything was
Yes.
new. It's like,
Yep.
oh, like what are you supposed to do on St. Patrick's Day? Or like what do
Yeah.
you do on Sundays when you just feel so anxious about work? Like, what? You mean to tell me we're just supposed to sit here? Like I'm just supposed to, and then also like my relationship, and this is so dumb, but like my relationship with football. Because drinking and football it was just Saturday drinking, this college NFL Sunday, right? And then I just remember looking at the TV and being like, what am I like, really? Like, I'm supposed to just sit here and watch this.
Dude, same.
Exactly the
It was
same.
like religion. Saturday, it started like Thursday night. It was a great excuse to drink. Thursday night game, Friday night, Saturday, and it just, and then now you notice like, oh my God, these games last forever.
They're so long,
and they're just nothing but beer commercials and pizza commercials, and you're just like, I just feel compelled to drink by watching this, just because you keep showing me these sexy people drinking and tailgating,
right?
And it's like, God, I gotta go do something, so my love for football, even though I still respect the game and everything, I don't watch it like I used to 10 years later. It's like a different thing for now,
For
because
sure.
it's time. It's just like, shit.
It is time. Yeah. Like, it took me a really long time to watch football again. And now I watch a lot of NFL because my kids like to watch it or whatever, but I really don't watch college football. I'm not super hungover. I don't need to just lay on the couch and do something. I can like go out and do something.
Yeah.
Although I don't, one of the issues I have with like the whole sober content creator algorithm thing is all of the glorious like montages of people just, doing yoga and going for hikes and doing like right away, because I think it makes people feel like they're doing it wrong
Mm-hmm.
in the
Yeah.
beginning. Because in the beginning, you just, if this is my philosophy, you just have to get scrappy, right? So whatever it takes to not drink or use, do it, whatever that looks like for you. So if you're not running a 5K, who cares? Like, go walk for
Right.
20 minutes. It's the same. And so I
Yeah.
think the comparison trap of social media makes it, you're like, oh, I was bad at drinking and now I'm bad at recovery. Like what the hell? I am not good at either.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. I agree with you wholeheartedly there. The early days are really difficult because you start
Mhm.
questioning, to your point, everything about your identity. Who
Mhm.
am I going to show up as at this work outing? Who am I going to show up as when I've had a rough day and I need to be super mom without that crutch? These toxic coping strategies that we use, and alcohol for me was my choice,
Mhm.
my number one cheerleader there for me anytime. And so
Sure.
you change the people that you're around, the places that you go, the things that you do, but not tomorrow. Like
Right.
tomorrow in the early stages is like, I'm just trying to get through today.
Mhm.
And I'll be not drinking today, and then I'll probably make the same choice tomorrow, but I'm not like out running a marathon, to your point. Like, I
Yeah.
haven't quite transitioned there yet. And so
Yeah.
social media, I guess you're right, perpetuates this idea that you stop drinking and then all of a sudden there's this blissful transition into all
Yeah.
of these great activities. And it's like,
Yeah,
well,
it takes time. And I even today just posted a video of a montage of the things that I do now, right?
sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I did a voiceover and I talk about like the experience of it, but this is 10 years later. This is not
Right.
Mm-hmm.
what you should expect tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that first year was just all of these firsts, and then even like, what do I do with my hands? Like at a party,
Right.
like how do I talk to people?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like all the social skills, like I was like a little child, like people like, what's up? And I'm like, good, just like,
Yeah.
You're so
oh,
right. You're
Yeah. I
so right.
remember, Greg, you would talk about like going to a
Yeah.
happy hour for the first time and sweating and being like,
Yeah.
I just didn't
Yeah.
know how to behave. Like, I wasn't
mhm,
sweating because I was having withdrawal. I was sweating because I had social anxiety so thick
Yeah.
that I
mhm,
didn't know how to show up in that situation.
Yeah. Like 2 weeks after hard stop, had I'm a loan officer for a bank, and meeting with my whole team. And in the past, it was buy drinks and shots. And
sure,
I looked at myself as the ringleader of that, as a
yeah,
good, and making sure everyone's nice and buzzed at 6:30. We got to get rocked, and it was like water. And I'm like,
yeah,
it was
Yeah.
just so intense. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Because you're, like you said, it's the first. I mean, I started drinking probably around 16,
mhm,
and just never experienced what it was like to be a grown ass man without
right,
a
without
drink.
alcohol, yeah,
So
it's
wow.
wild.
That's a great segue. I know that a lot of your focus has been on mental health as well. And your books that you've written have been about helping teens explore coping strategies or
Yeah.
being able to communicate with their parents and helping parents communicate with their kids. Can you speak a little bit about that and what you've learned in all of your years of your education background and how that's kind of applied to your own journey in this
Yeah. I mean,
all-free world?
I was a high school teacher for 10 years, and then I was a high school assistant principal, and then I worked in therapeutic schools for a long time, building therapeutic programs for kids with typically co-occurring disorders, so mental health and addiction,
Mm,
but on the educational side, so how do these kids still access education in school and keep going? So what that did for me was it really showed me the worst case scenario often where the problem has been addressed at the late stages where it's very intense and very dramatic and very expensive.
mhm.
So really what I wanted to do was like get to a place where people were having uncomfortable conversations now rather than waiting to the end and spending like $100,000 on treatment
Right.
when oftentimes this could have been very easily addressed. I mean, in a whole lot of discomfort, but in the comparison between the two, could have been easily addressed. When you talk to your kids about drugs, it doesn't make them do drugs. When you talk to your kids about sex, it doesn't make them have sex. Like when you talk to your kids about mental health, it's not going to like make them depressed. These are all things that we need to be addressing in real time, proactively, unemotionally, kind of non-dramatically, so that they don't become these big manifestations later.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like my eyes were open to that as I was able to be more honest with myself when I stopped drinking about the choices that I was making and what they were driven by. It completely reframed how I parent and the conversations that we have with our kids as they become teenagers around these topics in a
Totally.
way that I'm not sure I would have been able to do if I weren't practicing that brutal honesty with myself that comes along with the decision to get real about my coping mechanism or
Right. And it's not like every parent who drinks has a drinking problem, right?
right.
But there is something to be said. It's pretty hard to talk to your kids about their mental health and their coping skills if you as an adult don't address yours.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's why a lot of parents don't, is because there's this shame or the reality that you're going to have to actually look in the mirror and have some hard conversations with yourself. Because if you're, smoking a bowl every night and then you tell
Mm-hmm.
Tommy, like, hey, no weed, he's going to be like, fuck you, you smoke weed,
Yeah, you
Yeah.
hypocrite.
so it's just this weird, discomfort. But I can guarantee you, working in that really elevated setting, it's not as uncomfortable as having a kid overdose or try to take their own life or self-harm or, have a psychotic break.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I can't even imagine. I feel very grateful that we had our own struggles and awful situations that I think everyone probably experiences. Not everyone, that's too big of a blanket statement, but a lot of people experience and maybe write off until you start reflecting on it in a different light. But I'm grateful, that we kind of broke that cycle early in our kids' lives
Yeah.
and have handled it differently because I just can't imagine, especially the responsibility that comes along with that as a parent. You
Hmm.
feel responsible for everything, and that's a very heavy one.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
did you, in your experience, feel any trepidation about sharing this part of your journey,
Yeah.
like with your kids?
I did not share about it for a long time. And actually, I didn't tell anybody beyond my wife and my therapist for like 6 months. And then I didn't say anything publicly. Actually, I was outed sort of as being sober on a podcast. And I
Mm,
went on a podcast with a friend who lived in Texas, and he's a big author, educator. And I went to talk about education, right? Because that was really what I was known for, was this kind of intersection of mental health, substance abuse, really actually just mental health and education. The substance
mm-hmm.
abuse I hadn't really talked about because I didn't want to talk about it. And then on the podcast, he just like asked a question like, "Oh, tell me about your sobriety." And in that moment, I had to make a choice. Like, oh, do I say like, oh, I don't want to talk about that? Or do I just like go for it? And I just went for it. So that was not until probably 2018, maybe.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
a few
Wow.
A
years
few
later,
years. Yeah. Hmm.
when we first stopped drinking, it's received differently by a lot of people. And I'm sure you
Yeah.
have experienced that as well. People aren't sure how to respond. I feel like it does one of two things, makes them reflect on their own choices in a way that they feel like they have to kind of defend, even though you
Oh,
weren't
yeah.
trying to make them feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Or that they kind of ask you, like, you don't drink at all. And you're like, then you feel the responsibility to explain yourself with
Right. You
your,
have to just like sober explain them.
yeah, sober explain. That's great. So that's probably a pretty relatable type of response that people have when they first start talking about being sober. My choice doesn't have anything to do with anybody else's choice. And my
Sure.
choice does not mean that I'm judging other people,
Yeah.
but it still feels that way sometimes. And so that's why I love your content so much, because you're so brave and authentic in the way that you share it, that it doesn't feel judgmental. It doesn't feel like you have to be defensive about it. You're just literally saying, like, this was my choice and this is how it's impacted me. And I think it's interesting to hear that you had some trepidation around it. I was curious, just in researching you, like, if you were bashful, for lack of a better word, because of your education career, if people would,
Well,
be,
so yeah, I mean, for sure, yeah, because I quit drinking in 2015, but I didn't quit my job at the high school until the end of 2016.
Mm.
mm,
So all of 2015, all of 2016, maybe some people knew, but I didn't talk about it. Absolutely. I didn't want to be like having people second guess every decision I had made or,
right.
any choice I had made. And I didn't drink at work. I am
Sure.
proud of that. I am proud of that because I drank a lot of places, but I didn't drink at work.
Yeah,
But for sure, there was this like sort of moral high ground that I felt like I had to maintain
sure.
to keep my credibility.
Sure.
And certainly now as an entrepreneur, I don't give a shit what
Right.
people think. And I don't make content to sell anything. I don't have a click funnel. I don't have anything. So it's just like, I'm just saying what I want to say. And some
Yeah.
people have main character syndrome where they want to make it about them and they get into comments and they get really aggressive, or they're like the sober police and they're like, that's not correct. And meh. But I
Yeah.
don't like
That's with
that stuff
anything,
used to
right?
really bother me. But now I'm just like, okay, block and bless.
Block and bless. I love
Yeah,
that
I'm not
too.
doing it. I'm not here to convince you. I don't care. Like, go
Yeah.
get hammered.
And the
Yeah.
people that you're resonating with and the people that you're impacting in the way that they need is louder. It's way
Right.
stronger than the
Yeah.
people who want to show up and be keyboard police or whatever.
Yeah. And that's where I had to like really remind myself, why does our brain do that? Like, you can have 100 positive comments and one negative, and then the brain is like, oh my God, I'm the worst. Like, you start looking at that person's profile and you want to like dissect their like bio and figure out, well, fuck you, Brad. Like, eh. But it just doesn't matter anymore.
I've got a question. You
Yeah,
mentioned therapy. Was that something that you started in parallel with quitting drinking?
for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I had been in therapy for a while before that, but mostly just to like, I would say to myself and to my wife, like, I'm only drinking because I have all of this trauma from my childhood and from growing up, and that's why, right? So let me go to therapy, and like once I work through it,
Mhm.
I'm sure I'll be able to quit, right? So
Yeah.
I really didn't start the meaningful work, I think, until after I was sober, because obviously then you're just stuck in your feelings, and so you have to get them out.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I think, as a listener out there listening to this episode, they might be like, well, I've thought about quitting or I want to quit, but it's so scary. But just knowing that, your story, I know for us, our story, we've definitely leaned on professional help. And quite honestly, without having that there, I don't know that I would have been able to see it through and be sitting here 10 years later. Not only therapy, but also having like one of my best friend was also going through NA at the time, so he was kind
Mhm.
of feeding me the crucial mindset shifting things of like one foot into yesterday, foot into tomorrow, you're pissing all over today kind of stuff to like,
Totally,
because
yeah.
you're always in your head. You're like, well, I got a thing coming up next week. I got to drink. How am I not going to drink at that? And I love Christmas ales and it's Christmas time. How am I not going to drink those? And you're like,
Right,
just
right.
what do you need to do today? Today. And it's
Right,
like,
the future
yeah,
tripping. I have people who want to quit drinking. They're like, yeah, but like when my daughter gets married, like, and I'm doing the champagne toast, I'm like, bro, your daughter's 8.
Yeah.
yeah,
And if you don't stop drinking
yeah,
and you just completely fuck up her life,
Yeah.
then is she going to be healthy enough to even get to that phase of life, right?
yeah,
So, like, get over yourself,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And Greg, you mentioned about our friend and the support system.
yeah.
Um, Daniel, you've mentioned about your wife being the only person who knew for a while. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of having a strong support system? We talk a lot about supportive spouses, but in this situation, who you can lean on, your therapist, and why that's a driving force in being able to continue each day.
Well, I mean, I think that the initial support of a spouse or partner or whatever family is good, but it's not the only thing, and it's actually not lasting because my wife does not have an unhealthy relationship with alcohol.
Mhm.
She is a little bit of a psychopath. Like she can have like a few sips of wine and set the glass down and not finish it at
Who
dinner.
is
And
she?
you're just like,
I'm just like,
yeah,
"Boo,
yeah,
finish it.
yeah,
Sometimes I will be like, I'm not leaving until you finish that. But so she just, she has the sympathy, but not the empathy, I guess, because she's not been in that. She doesn't understand it in the way that I do. And
Sure.
that's not her fault. And it shouldn't be my expectation that she assumes that role,
Sure.
right? So finding a therapist that specializes in addiction or finding a community group, and people have a lot of feelings about AA or NA but I'm telling you right now, there's like I could rattle off like 15 online support groups right now that are recovery like agnostic, right? They don't subscribe to any sort of like doctrine and they're great, right? Just
Yeah.
having any kind of person in the ring with you is super important to making it last.
yeah,
Yeah. I feel very grateful that we did this together, Greg, but I also know that, like in your situation, it is possible with a spouse or like our parents who still drink around us. And
Yeah.
we weren't necessarily uncomfortable with that. I just feel like it's great to have a support system because we get in our own head and we fall back into these bad habits and these associative habits that sometimes it's helpful to have someone there to be like, hey, remember why you're doing this. Or,
Oh, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
or if you're the other thing that was, is horrifying was horrifying to me and horrifying to a lot of people was that like getting new friends. Like what about my old friends? And then you sort of
mhm.
like phase some people out and you phase some new people in. And that doesn't have to be dramatic and it doesn't have to be right away. But if you're not like shedding people, you're not growing, right? And if
hmm
people aren't shedding you, you're probably not growing unless you're just like a
hmm
dick. But like, like there's gonna be times where you're gonna kind of move away. And so the people that I'm friends with now on a like daily basis or socially are not the same people that I had in my life 10 years ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
And but if I saw them, it would be great and probably still connected on social media mostly. Like it doesn't have to be this thing. So I know a lot of people fear like, well, what about my friends? And well, what about your friends? Like,
Yeah. For the most part, I feel like our friends were at first kind of like, are you guys serious? Because we were pretty, you know, pretty big
fun.
life of the party.
Yeah, I
Yeah, we
bet you
were
guys are really
lots of
fun.
fun.
I'm sure
Yeah.
you were.
And then it was kind of like, oh, you guys are serious. And then super supportive. And in fact, some of them have said, I've been inspired by your journey to reflect upon my own. And
Oh,
that
for
makes it
sure.
all feel really great. And not from a judgment standpoint, or like you said, I'm not trying to bring anyone along with me or help them make decisions or changes in their life. I'm just being me. And that's why I think I'm so drawn to you and how real you are.
Where I've landed in my messaging, and I appreciate the kindness and affirmation. is a derivative though of having landed in a very big kind of hero complex in like 2020 during like when I got really big on TikTok and a huge TikTok platform, which I don't have anymore. I deleted TikTok about, I don't know, almost a year ago, I think. And I had a few 100,000 followers, and then I started running these free groups, and then you could pay to be in the group, and it was like this kind of feeling like I had to save everyone,
Sure.
and I had to maintain this sense of like everything's good all the time in my content, right? Never showing up like, fuck, this is so hard and this is what happened. Like it was always really intentional to try to like boost everyone up. And in 2023, I ended up in a outpatient program for depression because
wow.
I was so emotionally exhausted. I was just laying on the floor of our living room. Like I stopped working. I just like, I could not function. I could not function. So I had to go. I didn't have to. I chose to go to this program. It was all day for 8 weeks. And it was like therapeutic summer camp, like all these people. It was so fun. It was so hard, but it was great. So I think now one of my other messages to people is like, you don't have to save anyone.
Yeah,
You really actually you can't save anyone.
that's right.
So don't even try. Like if they want to kind of follow your suggestion or they want to follow like the way that you live your life, perfect. But it's not your job, nor is it like your ego's job to be some fucking messiah to
Right.
people who are in recovery or thinking about it. So I really try to be like, take it or leave it. This is my message. This is my truth. I have good days and bad days.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of DMs. I get a lot of DMs that are super, raw, let's say.
hmm
And I used to take time to really like try to thoughtfully reply and like encourage, and you can do, I don't do it anymore, really.
Sure.
Like some people, yeah, but I don't respond to the like really pouty kind of victimy
hmm
messages.
Yeah,
It's not my job.
that's right. And you have established that boundary for yourself in a way that
Yeah,
keeps you healthy, which is
correct.
extremely important.
Yeah.
I so many things that you said that I can relate to and that I have questions about. 10 years later, or almost 10 years later for me, I still have moments where I'm like, if I were a drinker, I'd be almost there by now. It's noon. I've
Oh
had it with
yeah.
my kids, or it's a holiday and I'm over it. Do you experience that? And what are some of the things that you've learned along the way, tools that you lean on in those moments all these years later?
Well, yeah. I mean, what's so funny that there's the opposites. Like when I was a drinker, active drinker, I was a very rigid school schedule, like very you have no decision making power about your schedule, right?
Yeah.
But now I'm an entrepreneur and I just launched a new startup a few months ago, which I'm just at home working on, and I don't have to be anywhere.
Right.
I don't have to be anywhere, so I have to make myself have to be somewhere or have to have now having kids certainly helps, right? Because I do
Yeah.
like get up, get them ready for school, pack the lunches, take them to school, pick them up from school, coach their teams. But I go to the gym a few times a week with some buddies, and I go for a walk every day, and I try to, stay busy. Like yesterday, my wife was out of town with one of our kids, and so I had my oldest was with a friend, and then my youngest was with a friend. So I was like, I'm all by myself. Like this would have been prime drinking season.
Sure.
So I cleaned my
Yep.
house. I
Yeah.
cleaned. I
Yeah.
did the
There you go.
laundry. I did some rage cleaning. I didn't actually want to drink, but I just knew like that would have been the perfect
Yeah.
storm
hmm
of drunk Daniel. Be like, oh
NFL
yeah,
playoff
the
games.
universe
I mean,
clearly wants me to get
yeah,
drunk. Like,
yeah. It's
Yeah.
Sunday. It's
yeah.
Sunday fun day, bro.
Well, and it was raining here too, so that's even more
Yeah.
like, oh, it never rains here. I better.
Better get the whiskey out. Yeah.
Uh-huh. God.
Always a reason. That is for sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
that's
like
great.
embarrassing to think about some of the lies that I told myself about why I needed to drink.
Hmm.
And some of them that I still have to talk myself off the ledge about all these years
Sure.
later, kind of to your point at the beginning of like, it doesn't just happen overnight. So, what advice would you give someone who is doing dry January or someone who is, considering what life without alcohol might look like, but it's scary? You're on the mountaintop and you've got the microphone in your hand, what's
Sure.
your best line of advice for them?
I mean, I would just say don't get a case of the forevers, right? Like you don't have, nothing is forever. So if you decide to take a break, like it's just a break. Like as my older daughter would say to me, it's not that deep. It's not
Oh,
that
that's what
deep,
our kids
Dad.
say
It's
too.
not that deep, Dad. Um, it's not that deep, right? So,
Yeah.
but what I will say is that I think every adult should give themselves the opportunity, at least, to experience life without alcohol for long enough to know the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And the second half of that sentence is the big part of that sentence. Long enough to know the difference
Mm-hmm.
is not 31 days.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're just doing dry January, which is commendable, but you're literally just counting down the days and in your brain, you're like February 1st, getting hammered, you know? So you just have this 3 months, maybe you could start to tell, 6 months for sure, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's when you would then say, okay, am I going to go back or not? And I think the typical pattern for a lot of people that I experience is they go, I did 3 months maybe, and I haven't managed. I'm just going to drink, like put all the rules back in, but make it
Yeah.
bigger.
Yeah.
Only on weekends, never alone, only with
Yeah.
people, never at home. Like,
Yeah.
That's exactly what I did. Yeah.
yeah, you try to
Yeah.
rearrange the chairs like on the Titanic, right? Like it's not working. And so then the second time they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But people have to learn that on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you really can't, I think you can quit drinking for somebody else, but you can only stay sober for yourself,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
which is weird. So a lot of people will get ultimatums or, a health scare like me, and you're just like, okay, I'm gonna stop because the doctor told me, and my wife was like, what the fuck? And I'm like, oh, what the fuck? And so I'm gonna stop because I have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then month two was like, no, I kind of want to a little bit,
Yeah.
Yeah.
even though I
Yeah.
don't. I'm 50-50.
Yeah.
And then eventually I took ownership of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say that month 2 is accurate for you? That's when you feel like you kind of wanted to?
Well, yeah, I was afraid to drink.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was fear, but at least it was my own.
Sure.
I had quote, proven that I'm not an alcoholic. I can quit drinking. But I think what I really proved was that I actually was an alcoholic
Mm-hmm.
because it was so hard.
Yeah.
And, I just had this big calendar, like a school calendar up on my kitchen, and I would cross off with a blue Sharpie every day that I didn't drink.
Really?
Yeah, I did that for months, probably like 6 months.
Wow.
Like a huge tabletop one that's meant to go on the big principal's desk. I like ripped it off and I put it up on the wall.
Wow.
But
Amazing.
we didn't have anyone over, so no one knew.
No one could see it. Yeah. Well, as a woman, I had quit drinking when I was pregnant. And I was also a professional bodybuilder for a short time, and I could quit while I was training. So of course I didn't have a problem. I could quit whenever I want to, if I feel like I have a reason to.
Sure.
But then when the real time came and it was time for me to reevaluate kind of that relationship and who I show up as, it was like very easy for me to see that, like you said, I probably had a little more of a problem than I would have ever given credit to during that time when I couldn't see it that way.
Well, and that's the other part I think about early recovery is that if you're me, you tried to sugarcoat it. So I was always intentional about making it seem easier than it was to people around me, because if I said it was so hard, then I was just like proving everything right that I had such a problem. Does that make sense? So like by minimizing the struggle of initial recovery, I was hiding how deep the problem was for me.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Now that you say that, if I reflect upon like my initial months, I definitely I did that to myself.
Yeah.
I definitely, and not just for myself, but for everyone else around me, I think, to make them comfortable.
Yeah.
With
you
my
don't want to make
decision.
them too uncomfortable. Oh, it's fine. Everything's good. And then you're like in your car, like wigging out, like, ugh.
Yeah. I've had people reach out about this, not like it sounds like you have, where they're pouring their heart out to me. And I'm not sure I would be ready to handle that, but in a way where it's like, I didn't drink for 2 weeks and I didn't really feel a difference. And I commend them for their approach, but I agree with you that it takes so much longer to really get to the root of what you're feeling and why you feel that way to kind of make
And
that
also
decision.
if you have the need to send that message, then you don't actually feel that way.
Right.
Mhm.
Because
There's a
somebody
message in
who
that.
doesn't drink for 2 weeks and doesn't care does not send a message telling someone that they didn't drink for 2 weeks.
Right.
Mhm.
It's just not even a thing.
It's not even
There's
a thing. Like if I ask
right.
my wife, like, "Oh, when's the last time you had a drink?" She would be like, I have no idea."
Right.
She
Mhm.
It's
literally
not
wouldn't know. If you had asked me, like, "Oh, I haven't had a drink in 3 days," like I would
Mhm.
know, like, and I'd be
right.
so proud of it, and it would be this big thing. But that's not how normal people, and I don't say normal like we're different and they're normal, but normies is what, kind of a street name for people who don't drink is, or who don't have a drinking problem. Normies, they just don't think about those things.
Yeah.
I've
Like
never heard that before.
normies,
Is that like a West Coast
I
thing, or am I
guess
just
that's what
living
we
under a
call people
rock?
who don't have a drinking problem. Normies.
Normies.
People will be like, "Oh, does your wife drink?" And I say, "No, she's a normie."
Okay, that's great. I love that. I do want to
Sure.
ask you about what your new uh, venture is. You've mentioned it a couple of times about being an entrepreneur and working on a
Sure.
project. Is that something you can share and talk about?
Yeah, I mean, we're open for business. So I started a company called Known at Home, or Known for short, and it pairs adolescent substance testing, so instant drug test, instant alcohol test, instant nicotine test, with intensive parent education. So when you buy a test, it comes with access to a parent platform that's all of this curated content by licensed clinical psychologists trying to help you understand the why behind the what, right? So
Mhm.
like maybe don't just ground Timmy because he's, white girl wasted at homecoming. Why don't you actually figure out maybe why he's drinking? Is he anxious? Is he depressed? Was it just like a one and done because he was peer pressure or whatever? So what I understood about like, working in treatment is there's a lot of testing. There's a lot of drug testing that's available, but nothing came with any kind of parent support.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So I wanted to make something that was high quality, low cost, and highly like enriched with education. So it's a lot of mental health articles and how to support and what to do when and talking points, things like that. So I'm really excited about it.
That's
Amazing.
awesome.
Congratulations.
Thank
I mean,
you.
that's just such a beautiful transition from your own background,
Yeah.
your own journey, and marrying them together to
Yeah.
provide
It's just
resources.
natural. Yeah. And, not over 90% of adult addicts start using under 18.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's huge.
So, you know, but everyone can do whatever they want. But I wanted to, if people are going to have or test their kids, I want them to be empowered with the correct tools
Mhm.
to, you can test, but then what? Like,
What do you do
Mhm.
with that?
what do you do
Yeah.
with that? What do you do with that information?
Yeah, absolutely. Imperative to being able to make meaningful change versus just kind of treat the symptom or the situation
Correct.
in the
And maybe
short term.
create a little healthy paranoia
Sure.
in your children, so that they don't start using at an
Mhm.
early age, because every year that they don't use, they're less likely to have an unhealthy relationship with that substance.
Mhm.
Hmm. What are the conversations like, if you don't mind me asking, that you have with your kids? Are you there yet? Or are they still young enough that?
Oh no, definitely. I mean, my kids know that I'm sober. Obviously, they're very aware of that. They can, it's boundaries, not bubble wrap, right? So I
Mhm.
want my
Mhm.
kids to be out into the world doing things, being around things, but knowing there's a line in the sand that is defined. Because
Yeah.
Mhm.
ambiguity with teenagers does not work.
No,
It's the
Mhm.
no, it
worst.
doesn't.
No.
Mhm.
And
And again, it's hard. It's hard because you want your kids to like you and they want to get you. But if you get friend zoned by your kids, you're you're screwed.
yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's a very difficult, slippery slope to manage between being an authoritative figure and being someone that they can confide in.
For sure. I
And
think, and again, that's where I think the whole lean of known is it's not punitive.
yes,
It's live in information, not fear. It's sort of having these courageous conversations again to figure out the why behind the what.
I love
Mhm.
that so much. I think that's has the potential to help so many people, especially as parents and as adults, when maybe we don't know exactly what to do. That's obviously the point, but like if you don't know how to approach these topics, you just tend to stay away from them. Even if you are sober, even if you don't
Right,
drink,
totally.
it still can be very uncomfortable because so-and-so's parents drink and I was at their house and they are normies and they just had a glass of wine with dinner. Why can't
Right.
you guys do that? Or what does
Yeah.
it taste like? Or,
Or
tell
even
me.
like if you have a kid and their best friend's parents don't care if their best friend drinks, right? But you do. So how do you navigate that dynamic?
Absolutely. Resources to help people
Mhm.
feel empowered and armed with knowledge that around uncomfortable topics.
Yeah, that paralysis by analysis, it's not worth it.
Yeah. All right.
Very
Well,
good. Thank you so much.
yeah,
Yes,
thank you
thank
so
you.
much for sharing all of your experience and your insights. Where can people go to find more about you and your new venture? You're
Sure.
known at home.
Patterson Perspective is my handle, and knownathome.com is the business.
Amazing. I will link those in the show notes.
Thank you.
To all of you listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us. If this resonated with you, please share it with a friend. It takes away the stigma of not drinking being a big scary monster and makes us, can we be normies too?
Unfortunately not.
No,
But
no, that's not how that works.
that's not
But
how
it
it
does
works.
kind of normalize the conversation around what to do with alcohol, what not to do with alcohol, what it means to everyone, and makes it not so
Not that deep.
not that deep.
It's
That's
not that
right.
deep.
Thank you. We have new episodes every Wednesday.
Nice.
We hope you'll join us again soon. Thanks so much, Daniel. Thanks, Greg. Until next time.